Welcome to Better Than We Found It, the podcast that goes inside the minds of the leaders building our future.
The difficult we do today, the impossible we do tomorrow.
I'm Josh Huggins, founder of GS2, a search firm dedicated to finding the visionaries powering the most critical shift of our time, the US energy transition.
So much of what I do is passion driven because of those experiences.
This season, we're tracing the unique journeys of the architects of America's new energy landscape, exploring how their diverse backgrounds forged the psychology, the ambition, and the brutal truths required to lead in a time of unprecedented change.
If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to be a risk taker, and you got to be able to take calculated risk.
My mission is to uncover the playbook of the leaders in the industry, so we can all learn what it takes to build a world that's truly better than we found it. So today, my guest is a leader whose career has been forged in the high-stakes world of multi-billion-dollar energy and infrastructure projects. Jody Snodgrass is the CEO of TruGrid, a turnkey EPC for utility-scale solar and energy storage. But his journey is anything but linear. He's been a founder who built and sold multiple companies, a top-tier consultant at Deloitte, navigating corporate culture, and a C-suite executive for some of the largest energy companies in the world. He's seen the industry from every possible angle as the owner, the contractor, and the consultant. And today we get into the brutal truths of that journey, the personal sacrifices required for a global career, the hard lessons he's learned from failure, and the relentless drive for continuous improvement that defines his leadership style. So let's dive right in. So Jody, welcome to Better Than We Found It.
Well, Josh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Excellent. And I did do a quick intro to the audience before you joined. But for those who don't know who you are or who TruGrid is, would you mind just giving us a quick overview?
Sure. Again, my name is Jody Snodgrass. I'm the CEO of TruGrid, and we are a self-perform EPC that delivers both utility scale solar and battery projects.
Thank you. So the thing that fascinated me, Jody, about your career, if we can dive straight into the early days, is it feels like you started your career in reverse. Most people work their way up in business, they work out how to do things, and then they become either a senior leader or an owner. But you started your business, your first business, at the age of 20. So I'm keen to hear about that journey, but also maybe some of the truths about learning leadership, that when you're thrust into the spotlight in day one and you don't really have anyone to hide behind.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I started ESI Environmental when I was 20. I had two business partners who were kind of the opposite of me. I was a 20-year-old, not yet graduated chemical engineer, and my two business partners were CPAs who were mid to late 50s, who had already had a full career, and we ultimately it was a lab experiment gone bad that turned into one of the largest regional environmental services company based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. We had 7 locations in 5 states, and ran that for about 11, 12 years.
Wow. So being one thing, I suppose, to start with then is that dynamic. You as a young 20-year-old, your other business partners much further on in their career, should we say? How did the dynamic between the three of you work, and how in terms of leadership, and maybe some of the mistakes I'm sure you made with your youthful exuberance?
No, that's a great question. It was always very interesting conversations, because as besides a generational gap, you also had engineering versus finance gap, and all of those things in between, and we at times it was tense, and at times that dynamic worked really, really well, because we saw the world completely differently, and we're able to marry the two different thought processes into ultimately what became a very successful company. We ended up selling that company at about a 13.5 multiple of cash flow. So it was a great adventure.
I'm sure you were learning as you went, flying by the seat of your pants.
I'd love to say that I'm not good at this because I'm smart. I'm good at this because I screwed up so many times. I eventually learned from my mistakes.
What was the biggest mistake you think you made back then?
thinking that engineering was the entire project. Engineering's about 10% of a project, and not understanding the construction, obviously, and learning that as I went. I think the one thing I did, it took me a little bit of time, but certainly did come to truly appreciate is, cash is king. Cash flow is, you can't go down to the grocery store and buy groceries with an accounts receivable. You have to collect.
Yeah, understood. So how old were you when you sold that business?
I was 30. Yep, we sold that when I was 30. I stayed on for a couple more years as a transition guy.
So you're in your early 30s. You've just had huge success, maybe beyond your dreams when you first set out to grow the business. You've sold the business. You've got a good lump of cash in your pocket. Maybe some 30-year-olds would have head to Vegas and partied for a few years. And maybe you did do that, but I know you did.
I did.
But I know you went into business very quickly afterwards. So what was the inspiration for the next company, and how did that company?
Excellent question. So I went into we started Rose Energy Discovery. There were 5 of us, 5 partners. Basically, really as developers in alternative energy. We had a couple of we had a patent in gasification and some proprietary technology around anaerobic digestion, and got heavy into the anaerobic digestion gasification world, and built a gasifier for the city of Philadelphia for their municipal biosolids, and digesters for corn to fuel ethanol plants, and for large dairies, and combined animal feeding operations. And in 2006, natural gas was $12 a million BTUs, and we were peak oil, and I thought I was going to be a billionaire. And 2007, fracking happened and horizontal drilling, and natural gas dropped from $12 to $2.75 almost overnight. And ultimately, just kept funneling money in and thinking it was going to come back. And then then we had the housing crisis in 2008, and all the private equity money dried up, and it just it went the wrong direction very, very quickly.
So, having been so successful so young, and whilst I'm sure there were ups and downs in the first business, ultimately it was a successful exit, and then going into your next business and having huge success pretty quickly afterwards. You said there you thought you were going to be a billionaire. I'm sure that probably is true, that you really did believe that. But that period of time where things started to go the wrong way, how did you adjust to, I suppose, that continual failure, or not failure, but continual losses that you were experiencing? And
right. No, it's I'm not going to lie. It wasn't easy. Right. And you keep thinking it's going to turn around, and the eternal optimist, and it'll fix itself and everything else. And, I wrote a lot of checks and didn't receive very many. And my wife was the voice of reason at that point and said, you got to go get a real job. And so ultimately that's how I ended up at Jacobs. So
understand.
There were some difficult moments in that 2007, early 2008 timeframe.
And obviously there is always there's always things you can control, but a lot of the things you were facing were market conditions that you can't really control. How did you deal with that sort of personal issue of not being able to turn the business that you'd worked so hard around?
Not, just to be blunt, not well. So, I think the one thing I learned through that was, my personal finances were so intermingled with the company finances, because in my brain for that 15, 16, 17 year period, they were one and the same. Company success meant my success meant company success. Everything's going to, work out great. And it didn't. Right. And so you have to kind of, retrain your brain that just because, your venture and your capital is not going well doesn't necessarily mean your personal finances don't have to go well. And that was really the point in my life where I started to focus on separating those two things and putting them different than each other, and not being so personally vested in what I was doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I've heard lots of these types of stories from different leadership podcasts I've listened to, books I've read, that, trying to separate the two, and your identity is not your company. Although it's, as an owner and founder myself, I know it's very hard to not be one and the same. Finances,
Absolutely.
character. Good week, you feel great. Bad week, you feel horrendous. It's it's tough. And particularly in a volatile market like energy, I'm sure those swings and roller coaster must have been extreme.
It's the perpetual roller coaster. Absolutely. And, for a lot of people, including me, you tend to thrive off of that, right? That is, when things are going poorly, you double down. When things are going well, you ride the wave. And it's, it is, for a lot of folks, they thrive on that continual turmoil and stress, and including me. So, yeah,
for sure. But for most people, I suppose at, what was it, maybe 35, 36, they'd still be in the years of real growth around leadership and stepping up to bigger roles. You've already been running companies for so long, maybe feeling like you knew all the answers. It must have been quite humbling as well to recognize that actually everything I touch doesn't turn to gold.
Right. Exactly. It turned to gold for a minute. It was fool's gold. That was the that was the problem. Yeah. Sure. So, quite frankly, there were two kind of things driving me. I needed that paycheck every that, because I hadn't seen one in a while, and really needed to have a little bit more, at this point, wife and kids and all that kind of stuff, a little more personal stability, or family stability around that. So that was really kind of that driver to, maybe I need to shift gears here and go a different path, which is, going from small, mom and pop startups, then to Jacobs, which is at the time was a 75,000, behemoth, engineering EPC company around the world. Was quite a bit of a culture shock, just to be blunt.
I was going to say, what were some of the things that you recognized early on, when you stepped into there, that you might need to kind of change or shift what you've been doing?
If you didn't do a timesheet by Monday morning at 9 a.m., you got locked out of your computer. That was new. I hadn't had a timesheet before. That was interesting. Yeah. Certainly, just all of the, I had managed people, for years, but hadn't managed them in a structured environment, so to speak. And so coming into Jacobs, which is a very structured environment, had been around for years, and, built the entire company based off of process and structure and how do we do things. And every day, it felt very rigid for me when I first started. There was not a lot of flexibility. And I would say the one other thing that was really, kind of shocking is not the right word, but certainly difficult for me to deal with, is I was used to dealing with, the P&L statement, right? The cash flow, being able to deal with how do we ebb and flow with the market, all that kind of stuff. I was, many layers down within the Jacobs organization when I came in, and it was all about just your group. Don't worry about cash flow. Just your billability is the only thing that matters. And, getting your deliverables. And it was really a different mindset for me.
And what about the perception or how you were received by your peers? Because, a lot of those I would assume have been, in the organization as graduates, grown up and, lived the, although Jacobs has some amazing projects, but as sort of Jacobs sheltered life, you've run your own business, you've got that freedom, you've had that, and then you're kind of stepping in. Was there a sort of balancing of the peer group, or did you find that actually helpful to learn from them? They could learn from you.
It was helpful to be able to learn both ways, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Also, when I came in, it was a very small group that it had been a large group that had been just diminished and cut to the bone and really not looked after for years. And I think we started with maybe 12 or 13 people when I came on board in 2007. And then we doubled that business every year on year for 5 years in a row through 2012. So, we went from 11, 12 people to several hundred, within a kind of a 5-year period, and won a lot of work, and that was so it was still, I was still an entrepreneur. I was just an entrepreneur within a much larger organization.
Yeah, an intrapreneur
With a lot of resources, which was kind of cool, because the resource was always me. Let me go get the IT guy. Oh wait, that's me. Let me go get the HR person. Oh, that's me too.
Yeah, I know that feeling. But a lot of resources, a regular paycheck, and you're probably thinking, hey, this is not a bad gig. But obviously that it's not always rosy. So what were some of the challenges you faced in going from running your own business to stepping in, and the bits that maybe you struggled with?
I think really the couple of big challenges, and it's within all large organizations. Just because you do well doesn't mean you're rewarded the way you think you should be, and doesn't mean you're getting promoted the way you think you should be. There are, particularly in large organization, lots of office politics. There's lots of, I didn't even know what office politics were. That wasn't something I was familiar with for the first 15, 16, 17 years of my career. And kind of dealing with that, trying to understand, how the game's played, and so to speak, and all those kinds of things was really, I struggled with, listen, I did good work. I did this, I did that. I should be promoted. I should, you should give me a big bonus, and all these kinds of things that don't happen in those kind of organizations.
Sure. And I suppose one other area of your career that I want to pick up on before we dive into TruGrid and where you are was the then the move from Jacobs to Deloitte. I'm right in saying Deloitte came after Jacobs?
Yeah, in 2015 when oil crashed, in 2012 I had moved up to Calgary as part of Jacobs North America Infrastructure to build out their infrastructure group, which we built out very quickly. I was employee 1, Jacobs North America Infrastructure, and I think we were, with all told, with the folks on site and everything else, we were close to 4,000 about 2 years later. It was a huge jump between multiple large projects and programs that we won. And then oil crashed. In 2015, oil went from 130 to 27 or something, and so all $200 billion worth of projects in Western Canada got kind of dried up. And so I was, Jacobs had kind of presented, hey, no problem, we can send you to I forget what it was, Riyadh, West Nigeria, Kuala Lumpur or something like that. And oh, by the way, you can't take your family. And that was really kind of I need to switch directions here and maybe look at something else. And that's how I ended up ultimately with Deloitte, leading their capital projects group, not leading their capital projects group, but part of their capital projects group, leading the value engineering group. And what was really interesting in that was really, really twofold. I had a project at Jacobs that ultimately was awarded the Jacobs Master Builder Award, which is kind of the coveted, 7,000 projects a year, 1 or 2 projects, typically 1 project a year wins that award. And so I was able to take that and another program that I was on, for one for Shell and one for ExxonMobil, that both came in on time and on budget, and that doesn't happen very often in large project world. I was able to leverage those things into a consulting career at Deloitte, which was completely different model, and you're you're really at an entirely different level within your client's organization. In the Jacobs projects world, you might be talking to a VP on the other, the client side, but it's usually maybe another project manager or a director or something like that. And the Deloitte level, you're at the C-suite with just about everybody, and so it was a whole different viewpoint of looking at project delivery, execution, instruction, those types of things.
For sure. So you've had the culture shock of going from running your own thing to going to Jacobs, and that's structured, but I'm sure going from Jacobs to Deloitte is even more corporate than before.
Yeah. I didn't get to wear a hat every day. That's for sure. Not at Deloitte. I had to, I was in large construction at Jacobs, and we didn't necessarily talk to each other as professional as you could
Yes.
in that environment on a daily basis. So that was a bit of a culture shock. Just really moving up that level. But the one thing of all of the things I did at Deloitte, and there was some really good stuff, but was for me it was grooming school. It was, how do you move from, okay, yeah, projects, construction, you can deliver a P&L, that kind of stuff. Now, how do you move up an echelon to, the next step to be, professional and to be able to work at a professional level. And so for me, Deloitte was really what I would call grooming school.
You mentioned a few things that I just want to pick up on in terms of the personal sacrifice, the locations that you had to travel to, and obviously not being able to take your family meant that was a no-go for you with Jacob. But you did mention Calgary and other locations you've been at. So your career being so successful, to this point, has also had quite a lot of personal sacrifice. How I appreciate you kind of sharing some of this, but how do you think that balancing work and home, can be done more effectively for leaders in this space? Because I do think that it's a big challenge for, all the executives I talk to in the energy world is, there's a big travel element to it, and it can be very difficult for the family life at home as well. So, could you share some more about that?
Yeah. I've done projects in 27 countries, been around the world a few times. And it certainly, in my case, it took a toll on my personal life, because I was so, as you mentioned earlier, you're so personally invested in what you're doing. It becomes, part of your identity. And so on that roller coaster, when you're down professionally and personally. When you're up, you're, professionally and personally. But I spent, an awful lot of time traveling, and, there were times where I'd be gone for 3 weeks, home for a week, gone for 3 weeks, home for a week. And that certainly takes a toll on everyone, and including me. Like it wasn't just, and I don't mean to make this about me, but it certainly, I've tried to, as I've professionally matured over the years, I think it's really important for executives to just, you take a weekend even, and just say, okay, from Thursday night to Monday morning, I'm not going to talk about work, and just try to separate. And it's hard, but try to, because you're going to get the 14 phone calls on Friday of like, this is an emergency, we have to take care of this now. And it's not always an emergency, number one. And number two, it's, you need to have some folks under you who you empower to make decisions and do things. And so the world doesn't come to an end.
For sure. I think that's a really important point that, I talk about a lot with my clients when they're thinking and planning about their teams, or the type of individuals they're looking for, that being able to build resilience in the organization, so it isn't just reliant on you or your senior executive you're hiring, is such a crucial skill that people have. And it is a skill, because it's so easy when you're a high performer and high accountability person to just take that workload on and take it away from your team. But actually, you're perhaps not building an organization that has the resilience to be able to deal with it when you do need to take a break,
right?
Which ultimately doesn't create the best environment. So what sort of things do you do now to try to help either yourself or your executive team to build that resilience, and also to be able to take breaks when, it feels like we're in this never ending hamster wheel right now, but you still need to take that time?
Sure. No, it for me, it's, I have to remind myself that my role is not to do the work. And really, for most of my management team, it's not their role to do the work either. My role is three things. I joke all the time, but my job is to do nothing. I'm not digging a ditch. I'm not landing wires. I'm not turning a wrench. My job is to define and sell a vision, maybe put up some guardrails, but let folks make the roadmap of how to get from point A to point B. But my job is to define where is point B, which is an ever moving target. I mean, point B, but hopefully it's, a few months out that we're aiming for that. Number two is to get people the resources, and that could be software, labor, money, skill sets, training, all kinds of stuff, materials, those types of things. And so is to get people the resources so they can go on their journey from point A to point B. And then lastly is to remove roadblocks. And lots of times people say, Jody, we know where point B is, we know where we're going, we got a roadmap, we've defined it, you got us all the resources to get there, but there's this mountain in the way, and we can't seem to get around it. And so my job's to do that. My job is not to do the work. And too many times I want to this is just got to get done, and I'll just and that's not my job. And I have to remind myself of that a lot, that's not my role. And when you're at least for me, when I can define that as my role, and those are the things, those don't typically move on an hourly or daily basis. Those move on a probably monthly basis. And so, yes, I can do things to help steer the race car, but really the team needs to be, driving the race car.
For sure, yeah. I want to dive into your leadership philosophy in a bit more detail. Just I suppose on your journey before we move on to that and TruGrid. You've described the different sides of the coin you've sat on: the owner who's signing the checks, the consultant giving the advice, the employee in the organization, or the contractor executing the work. What do you think, if you were to say the one biggest piece of disconnect between those parties that no one likes to admit, what would you see, having sat all sides, that is the biggest disconnect?
I would say, I don't, again, to your point, I've had this very unique experience where I've spent 16 years as an owner, 16 years as a contractor, and 3 years as a consultant. So I know both sides of the coin and the edge. And I think the biggest disconnect is one side of the coin doesn't know what the other side of the coin really does or how they do it. And when you can understand, both the owner and the contractor side, it becomes a whole lot easier, because when if I'm the contractor and you're the owner, as the owner, you'll say something and I understand, I know what you're saying, and it allows me to probe a little deeper. I think one of the biggest surprises I had when I was at Jacobs, we had an owner. It was a large portfolio. We were overseeing 42 plants. And the owner came to us and had a whole bunch of projects. We delivered really well on those projects, and we were, make up a number, we were $10 million under budget for the quarter. And we thought we'd get all these attaboys and you're awesome, and thanks for saving us money, appreciate that. And the owner's mad at us. And like, I didn't understand, and finally was able to sit down with him and please explain this to me. He's like, because I get bonus, I have to be plus or minus 10% on my quarterly spend. You underspent by so much because you quote saved us money, that I don't get a bonus now. And suddenly it clicked of, I thought I was doing something that was right for the client. And as it turns out, it wasn't at all. And so it was, as I've gone over the years, is learning what the drivers are, whether you're on the owner side or the contractor side. What are the drivers? What's the risk reward? What are the mechanisms that are going to make this work, and understand both sides? And I just recently, I was in a negotiation with a gentleman who I've known for years, and we've sat across the table from each other multiple times, multiple different companies. And so I've known him for 10, 11 years. We're negotiating back and forth, and he said, I want this, and I want this, and I want to do this. And I said, I know exactly why you're asking that question and what you want. And if I were in your shoes, I'd want the same thing, but you're not going to get that. and he just laughed, as both of us kind of understood where we were going. And so it's I think that was really that occurred maybe 15 years ago when I was at Jacobs, but that kind of aha moment of, you have to be able to understand where the other side's coming from and what the drivers are in order to have a successful outcome. And when you don't do that, it's you're guessing, you're throwing darts at a board.
So with that in mind, with individuals who want to progress their career and to be able to do more, do you advocate for a career path to go in and to experience both sides, to actively do that?
I would, because it's really eye-opening to understand. Like, if you've only been on an owner side or only been on a contractor side, it is difficult to understand, what the client or what the contractor's thinking, because you haven't been in those shoes before. And it's not that you're not a very bright person. It's just that you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's not about just what they're saying and understanding that, but it's also how they feel. And you're being able to, you've sat in the side of the owner, signing the checks and knowing what that means, the feeling of having to pay that money. And then when you're actually providing the service, you understand that. So actually it helps you be able to sell to that more and be able to be more successful. So I definitely see the career path where you can get both can actually add a lot of value when they join an organization, regardless of which side they then subsequently join.
Yeah, agreed.
Sure. So let's move on then to TruGrid. So firstly, for our listeners who might not be familiar with the organization, could you give us the elevator pitch? What's the core problem that the organization is that you're solving for your clients, and how do you go about it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So TruGrid was basically born out of a focus of only doing two things. One is self-perform EPC, utility scale solar and BESS projects, and the second is O&M services of solar and BESS projects. So we only do two things. The organization is based on some software that was developed 8, 9, 10 years ago that is really tailored towards making the 6 disparate systems of a battery system talk to each other. There are, the battery, typically in most systems, the battery system does not talk to the inverter, which does not talk to the EMS, and so on and so forth. And so the ones and zeros don't match up. 6 disparate systems of a software, and they don't marry up. They don't talk to each other. There are lots of great contractors in the construction world who can, build these systems. They're not difficult to construct. What is difficult is to commission them, to get them integrated and commissioned, because the traditional model is, okay, I constructed, I landed all the wires, everything's wired up, we've done a cold commissioning test, and then you call the suppliers to come out and start to commission it. So you're not commissioning it yourself, you're calling and depending on those suppliers. So the 6 main suppliers show up and they all, okay, mine's done, yours is wrong, and they sit around and point the finger at each other for months. In the BESS world, in the battery world, a year ago it took 6 months to get from mechanical completion to commercial operation. That was standard. This year it's now 7 months. We've gotten worse as an industry, not better. I have commissioned $5 billion oil and gas plants in under 6 months. And these are little battery plants. Our value prop is essentially that because we do the software up front, because we think about the integration up front, because we have a test bench facility where we can make the ones and zeros talk to each other in a controlled, conditioned environment, we can accelerate that commissioning time frame. So the industry average is now 7 months. We're running approximately 75 days. And we actually had a project earlier this year, back in April, where we reached from mechanical completion to commercial operation was 24 days. That was our fastest ever. And that's really our value prop, is we can get you to COD faster.
Mm-hmm. When you took over the firm, you mentioned to me that there were some challenges. And one of the things that you recognized was that the simplification of service that you've just described to me, perhaps, wasn't there. And maybe it was trying to be, too many things to too many different people. And as a leader, when you walk into a business like that and you realize you have to change, how do you go about that process and understand where what that vision needs to look like and where you need to get to?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm a firm believer in really maybe three things. As a leader is when you first come in, and this isn't just for the full leadership. This is at any leadership position with an organization. But if you're new to a company, is do a 30, 60, 90 plan, a 90-day plan, and to be able to walk in and say, okay, in the first 30 days, I'm going to assess our as is. In the next 30 days, I'm going to say, how are we going to change this? And the final 30 days is begin the execution of those changes. And again, I am, from my perspective, it's kind of a top down. What is the goal of the organization, or what is the goal of my department or my division or my group, whatever it is? Where are we going, and how do I align my group with those goals? And so, as an example, TruGrid is 100% owned by Hull Street Energy. It's private equity. And my first thing to understand is, where does Hull Street want this organization to go? Because that's how I need to align my goals. Is this a short-term, medium-term, long-term strategy? Is it going public? Is it selling to someone else in the business, to another private equity? All these types of things. Are they looking for 2x growth, 10x growth? And there's all these different things to take into account. And so number one is again, that as is state and developing where is point B and what does that look like? And so that's the first thing to do, again, at any level in an organization, is understand where are we going and help define what point B is. And so that you can build that, your team can build out that roadmap of how to get there. And then the second piece of that, as I mentioned, is get the resources to do it, build out the roadmap, get the resources. That's kind of the 2B strategy. And then the third piece of that is to execute it. So, anytime you come in, it's try to understand that. And so when I came into this organization, as I mentioned, you mentioned, we're too many things to too many people. Let's understand what we're good at. What is our value proposition? And what is all the noise? And how do we eliminate that noise and just focus on what we do and what we do well? There are too many distractions. It's hard enough to do things well when there's only a few. It's very difficult when there's 20 set in front of you. And so that was really kind of the way I view it, is when you come into an organization, you have to understand where you're going and how do you set that vision.
In a challenging economic climate like we're in right now, I suppose the opposite of that might say, well, if I walk away from doing this service line that is creating revenue opportunities for me, I'm getting even less income than I was then if I go focused.
I don't care about income. I care about net. Net income is the one that you can do $1 billion a year, but if you're losing $100 million and doing it, don't do it. The only thing worse than not getting the revenue is getting the revenue at a loss. So I mean, part of that was really to understand, what are we good at? What can we make money at? Is what's going to move the needle. Yeah, we're great at this, and we'll put a whole bunch of resources to it, and it's going to net us $1 million. Or we can put the same number of resources towards something else that's going to make us 10 million, and really kind of adjusting that thinking and adjusting the vision and the plan around that.
Sure. Yeah. And having the courage of your conviction when maybe as the CEO or the leader, you have the full picture, but there might be others in the business who are really comfortable doing this thing, which is what they're known for and what they're good at. But actually that's maybe not the direction of the business, and being brave enough to say we're not doing that. And, therefore this is the direction we're going in, which I suppose might be some more challenging conversations, but you have to have them.
Yeah. And there's certainly, there were and still are, challenging conversations around that. My goal is, I have to align the organization to ultimately what our owners want. And that's who I answer to. It's sometimes I'm a big proponent of the why. I typically 95% of the time won't just say thou shalt. I will say, we're going to do this and here's why. And I find that through my career, when I would give the and why part, that people might not agree with the methodology, of what we're going to do, but they understand the why. And so that's kind of the bad part of it, which is I don't agree with you, but I understand why you're doing it and the method to the madness. The other part is if they understand the why, they can and will, and this is what I expect, is they're going to say, Jody, we understand the why. There's a better way to get there. The way you're going is not going to get you where you think you're going to get to, and here's all the reasons. And so you allow your smart people to draw that map, right? I might, again, my job's to put out the guardrails. Now, there'll be times where I'm going to make the guardrails real small or real wide, but it's you let your smart people come up with that roadmap to get there. And usually, it's a better roadmap.
And during these difficult times, the role of the CEO becomes even more important, because your organization's motivation, in face of some of these strong headwinds that we are faced with, can be tough. So you said about sort of setting out that vision, but when the roadblocks become bigger, or the mountains become bigger, and there's more of them in front of your team, that leadership piece from a CEO is so crucial. How do you, in the current climate, keep your team motivated and engaged to push through, when they are facing setbacks, hurdles, financial troubles? What's the way you do that?
Focus on the things you can control. There are lots of things we can't control. I can't control what this current administration wants to do with tariffs or FIAC or ITCs or that kind of stuff, but we can focus on what we control. The one thing I do know without a doubt, we need 3.5% more electrons next year than this year, and 3.5% the year after that, and the year after that. Most forecasts show it goes to 6 to 7% because of AI and data centers and all those things coming online. We need more electricity. If I place a purchase order today for a large, natural gas, thermal combined cycle or HRSG or whatever, right now, I mean, you're 7 years out and another 2 years of construction. Small batch nuclear is very cool, and I think it is the future, but it's 10 years out. I mean, the only way we get to, we got 60 gigawatts of coal that's going over the cliff, and can't be pulled back. Like, there's no amount of investment you can do to pull 60 and 70-year-old assets back from going over that cliff, particularly when you haven't put any money into them in the last 7-8 years. And so you can't get there from here without battery, solar, natural gas, everything. We need all of it and then some. And so the market will adjust. The ultimately, okay, we need 3.5% more a year. Well, how are we going to get it? Okay, well, we'll do batteries and solar, and we'll do some other stuff. We can get there. Who's going to pay for it? Well, if it's not tax credits, if it's not grants, then the ratepayer is going to pay for it. So people are going to have to, readjust their power purchase agreements, renegotiate those, and get some increased pricing ultimately to the ratepayer. But if we want to upgrade the grid, if we want to do all of the things and around that and build more generation, somebody's going to pay for it. And so I'm very bullish about this business and where it's going. It may take months for the industry to adjust to those market pressures, but it will adjust because it has to. And so I just continually tell our team, let's focus on the things that we can control. We can control our costs. We can control our overhead and our expenditures. We can, continually search for, better, cheaper domestic content suppliers and work with folks to boost our supply chain. We can continually focus on improving the way we do construction and improving the amount of labor it takes to do activities and all those kinds of things to keep our costs in line and all those types of things. But let's focus on the things that we can control.
For sure. And building that culture and being able to say that message is one thing, but then you also need the people who buy into that and are aligned to you and want to go on that journey. So just moving the conversation on more to the type of people that you hire and how you do that. I know we spoke a bit in the pre-call around your approach to focusing a bit more on personality and culture rather than the skills. Tell me a bit more about your approach to hiring and how you test people when you're interviewing them for key and critical roles in your organization.
Excellent question. So the predominance of the management team I have right now, I've worked with in the past. I know their skill sets. I know their strengths. I know their weaknesses. I know where I can shore those up and everything else. But ultimately, of the hundreds of people in both owners and contract, construction side that I've worked with, it's about getting that right fit of personalities of people. Typically, these are all type A, high powered, my way or the highway kind of folks, and getting folks to work together in the same room and rowing the boat in the same direction is one of those things I take a lot of pride in, and being able to build out teams who have the ability to get the work done that needs to get done. And in saying that, it's trying to, a lot of times people want to row the boat and they'll row their oar, and then maybe you're having a little trouble over here, I'm going to row my oar and I'm going to help you row your oar, and that kind of, and normally it's a nice gesture, but normally it doesn't work out very well. Just row your oar, stay in your lane, please. And being able to do that. And in addition to that, I am, hopefully this comes across, but I'm a fact-based person. I make decisions based on facts, and that means the data is not always there, particularly when you come into new organizations. The data is there, or it's not there in a way that's digestible, and these types of things. And so that's really when you lean on people that you've known and trusted for a long time. And sometimes those are people in your organization. Sometimes there's people outside your organization. You have a sounding board of folks that I call, and they call me about things as through life as well. But it's trying to make those decisions based on enough facts to make a good decision. I am the opposite of a micromanager, whatever that is. I'm not it. I am the opposite of analysis by paralysis. I want to have enough information, but then let's go. I truly believe the worst decision you can make is no decision at all. Make a decision, live with it, move on, and course correct. Almost always, you will not be 180 degrees wrong. You might be 30 degrees wrong, but at least you're moving forward and you can course correct as you go. And so I challenge people all the time, make a decision. Let's make a decision. The other thing that, to that point, is that I really challenge my team with all the time is a philosophy I call embrace the red. And so people will look at dashboards and speedometers and P&L statements with red on it and everything else, and people are always scared to death to bring up the red. This is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble or lose their job, or they don't get a bonus this year or whatever. And I encourage teams, bring up the problems the moment you find them. Bring them up immediately, because it allows the organization and allows me to help you change those reds to yellows and the yellows to greens. If you try to hide it or bury it or not address it, you run out of time. Time is your enemy on everything that you do. And so I want to celebrate people bringing in, hey, this is a problem, because when we know it's a problem, we can fix it. Now, if you're the problem and you continue to be the problem, maybe that's a different discussion. But 9 times out of 10, that's not the issue. But too many people try to bury it, and they get in organizations where it's not culturally accepted to bring in bad news. And this is my very pea-brain version of project management, but it's something I've said for a very long time. Project management 101 to me is, number 1, identify risk. Number 2, mitigate risk. Number 3, if you can't mitigate, you escalate. That's it. That's all a project manager does. And at the end of the day, when you're delivering projects, the project manager is the person who's ultimately accountable to deliver whatever it is, whether it's on the owner side or the contractor side. Doesn't matter. It's the PM's. It's a thankless job, because if you do it well, nobody sees it. Yeah. And so, but it's you can't fix the problem if you don't know it's there.
Mm. And how do you? So you've mentioned a number of different characteristics there that is important to your philosophies. But when when you recruit people, obviously they can do it. But what about when you're bringing in someone new that you don't know? How do you ensure that, to the best of your ability, that actually that person is going to be the person you hope them to be, and to be able to fit into this culture that you're creating?
Yeah, no, it's really, I'm not always right by any stretch, but I've gotten pretty good at if they're sitting in front of me, they've already checked all the boxes. They've checked the skill sets, the background, the education, all that kind of stuff. At that point, it is understanding philosophically, will they mesh with the rest of their team members? And I have, too many times tried to put a whole bunch of A players, into a room, and that doesn't always work out. And most times, a lot of times doesn't, unless you're the Zen master. It can be difficult. I value loyalty over competency, and that doesn't mean I want incompetent people. I want competency, but loyalty means a big piece to me, and being able to, have, we used to always say you can't stab somebody in the back unless you're 100% behind them. I value loyalty and not having to worry about those kinds of things. A good friend of mine, somebody who I actually work with now at TruGrid, taught me his last question in every interview, which I adopted and I use now as my last question in every interview. It's a very simple question, but people really have to think about it. A lot of times I had to think about it, but do you love to win or hate to lose? And so people who are going to watch this now are going to know what the answer is. But my answer is hate to lose, not love to win. Because when people stop, if they love to win and they stop winning for whatever reason, that they're huge, they're gone, right? It's the people that hate to lose that will double down and figure out how to not lose. And one of my I watch lots of movies and television and quotes. I quote stuff all the time, but one of my there was it's an interview with Michael Jordan, ESPN 30 for 30, and I think it was Bryant Gumbel was the interviewer, but it was the opening, and he listed off all his credentials of Olympics and MVP and world championships and all that kind of stuff, and he kind of left it with, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but he said, and you won 108 games on your last second shot. And his answer was, yeah, and I lost 87. And to me, that is the hate to lose, kind of mentality. And that's something I drive with myself, and I drive within my organization, is that, I want loyal people who hate to lose.
Sure. Yeah. That's, yeah, if that's not on the TruGrid job descriptions, that should you should add that on. That's good. Well, hopefully not too. It will still make people ponder and think, but they haven't got all the answers to the questions that you asked.
That's right.
Yeah, that's one of them. Lastly, just on your own personal career and journey, you've, as we said, about the different sides of the table that you sit at, but now as an individual taking an organization from sort of startup or scale up phase through to the next journey that they go through, whether it's the major acquisition or IPO, what does the future look like for you with TruGrid under your leadership, and what's your goal and ambition for this stage of your journey?
I really like this part of taking I've done obviously startups, I've done the large corporation, I've done huge consultancies, all that kind of stuff. I really enjoy, you're kind of past the startup phase, but you're not like a quote real company yet, and taking it from that somewhat infancy to that next level. I think that's where I bring the most value. I think I can bring a lot of home runs in that space, and typically after that you're bringing singles and doubles. I like the home runs, and I like to be able to do that step change of hey, we're going to do this different process. I'm a huge fan of the stage gate process. So we're going to do a stage gate process. And only because I've done it so much, it works every time. We're going to do value engineering. We're going to do better supply chain management with strategic sourcing and category management. We're going to do better project control, so we understand, down to a much more granular level what we're spending our money at, and focus on controlling that. And that those are home runs. Those are big step changes that aren't necessarily easy to implement, but they're not hard either. Kind of the group of folks that I'm with right now at TruGrid, we kind of laugh about this all the time. This is hard work, but it's not hard. We've all done this before. We know what good looks like. We know how to get from point A to point B. It's hard work. It's going to take a lot of effort to get there, but it's not hard. It's not, because there's a methodology and a process, and if you follow it to, within guardrails again, you can get there pretty quickly.
For sure. And back to the MJ analogy, you've given the home runs. When you strike out so many times, you learn what not to do to make sure you can hit the home run. So
right, there's a lot of that.
Yeah,
but people forget that Babe Ruth was the home run king for years, in baseball many decades ago, but he also was the strikeout king. People forget that he struck out more than any other player in Major League Baseball. Yes, he hit a whole bunch of home runs, but he struck out a whole bunch too, because he was trying to hit a home run every time. But people only remember the home runs; they don't remember all the strikeouts. And so I am not a risk adverse person, but I want to be risk aware. And I would say, one of the big things you mentioned, how have I matured and changed over the last 35 years? In my very early professional life, I was just a risk taker. I was not, I was just a risk taker. I certainly wasn't risk adverse, and a lot of times wasn't risk aware. We just did it and hope it worked out. Gut feel, that kind of stuff. Now, working at large organizations who are very risk adverse, and I don't want to certainly go that far, is kind of in that middle where I want to be risk aware. Will I strike out some? Absolutely. Will I hit some home runs? Yeah, I'll hit some home runs too.
Exactly. We'll celebrate the home runs then. So just to finish off with, then I've got some quick fire questions that I want to pose to you. So, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Those you've heard all the time. Don't sweat the small stuff. Yeah, it's all small stuff. It all matters. Particularly in the project world, construction world, and that's where I spent the vast majority of my world, right? In operations and over construction and all that kind of stuff. Everything's on critical path. It might not be on critical path this moment, but it'll be on critical path one day. And you need to address everything that you can while you can. The one thing you cannot buy back is time. That's the one thing you can't buy back.
Sure. What's one book or podcast that every leader should read or listen to?
I do a lot of TED Talks. I'm a data junkie. I use a ton of AI. One of the probably best things I did, which was maybe 7 or 8 months ago, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a it's like a $10 a month subscription or something, but it shows you what the top 20 AIs are there and how to use them. Because prior to 7-8 months ago, I was using it like Google. I would just type in blah 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 blah, tell me an answer, right? And maybe a little better than Google, maybe not. But if you actually learn how the algorithms work for that particular software, you know how to write the right question or the right iteration of questions, or give it enough to give you really good answers. And it was, for me, it was a step change in how I collect information and data. Is it right? Probably not. But is it 85% right? Yeah. Yep. If you ask the right. And so really, for me, it was continuous learning. If I know it's silly, I learned really quick when I was at Deloitte, the more letters you have after your name, the more value you had to the organization. So I got an alphabet's worth of letters. And if you look at my LinkedIn, it's like, I don't know, certificates and diplomas and all kinds of stuff. But none of that was ever enough because I wanted to be the subject matter expert at something. It was enough so I could call BS on somebody.
Sure.
That's really what it was for.
Absolutely. How would you describe the culture of TruGrid in one sentence?
Collaborative. Like we all understand where point B is. We have an innate ability, and I've really, for the most part, been able to do this for about the last 15 years, is to be able to sit with a group of folks where they are encouraged and emboldened to speak freely. Because that's how you get good information and good context. When you stop communicating, that's when things start to fall apart.
And what's your favorite part of your job today?
Well, doing podcasts like this, of course.
Yeah, of course.
The favorite part of my job is, there's two pieces of this. On a personal level, it's the roller coaster. I love the roller coaster. I love the stress. I love I don't know what today's going to bring. It's not boring. If nothing else, it's not boring. So that's kind of on the personal. On the professional side, the put my other hat on. I love the people in this organization. I do. I care about them. They care about me. And every day, we get up and try to tackle what's in front of us, and all with best intents. And again, do we always hit home runs? No, we strike out, but and that's frustrating sometimes. But everybody has the best of intentions for us to try to get to point B as quickly as possible.
And if you could recommend one leader in the renewable energy space onto the podcast to tell their story, who would that be and why?
So for me, it's going to be from a personal perspective. I would certainly bring on Jose Antonio Miranda from Avangrid, who's currently the CEO of Avangrid, and his story coming up through Siemens Gamesa, and then over to Avangrid, and then his progression from the what used to be called Avangrid Projects, now Avangrid Power, up to the CEO of Avangrid and overseeing the Americas. It's quite a journey, and he's a very he's a hard driver without a doubt, but extremely inspirational individual. So
great. Well, I'll definitely get in touch with him. So Jody, my last question to you then, as you know, the podcast is called Better Than We Found It, and this is about your own personal legacy. So when the roller coaster has reached the end of its road, and you step back to look back at your career, what do you hope that your legacy will be to show the world that you left it better than you found it?
It's two things. From a project's perspective, it's understanding that I really had a step change at a particular project when I was at Deloitte, where I was embedded at a very large nuclear power plant and redoing all of their project controls. And, as a data guy, I love data anyway, but understanding the power of data and how to use the data. And when you have good data that you don't have to question, is it the source of truth? What's the data date? Where did it come from? Well, does it really mean what I think it means? When you can trust the data, you can make very sound, better, quick decisions. And so, as my career, as I look through things, this is the first time we did it about 75 days ago at TruGrid. It's the first time in my career where we have all of our software, with full APIs and instantaneous information at a level that we can make decisions at. And I've never been able to do that. And that means timesheets, schedule, cost codes, general ledger, payroll, document control. Like, we have everything with APIs now that all talks to each other automagically. And that's the first time in my career I've ever pulled that off. And I've tried for about the last almost 10 years now to about 7 or 8 different organizations to get there, and never quite got there. But we have a fully integrated schedule, cost, document control, P&L, that works and it works well. So that's one thing that I really am proud of, and certainly something I've tried to embed in all the organizations, and being able to use that with the stage gate process, because I fully believe in the stage gate processes. On a more personal level, is to be able to, whenever retire and some years from now, hopefully, but I'll be able to retire. I do have 6 kids. I mean, come on, but one day be able to retire. But 2 years after I'm retired, is people I've worked with, we still have a personal relationship, and I think there's probably 10 or 12 folks I can say that about right now, that I think that'll happen, and I'd love for that to be a bigger pool of people.
For sure. Excellent. Well, I'm sure from just this time in meeting you that you make a big impression on the people who work with you, for you, and for the associated company. So I'm sure that number's going to grow. But thank you so much for your generous time today. I'm sure people have listened and are keen, if they work in the sector or are keen to, hear more about your story. Would you be happy if people were to reach out and connect with you or the organization? And if so, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, the best place to go is LinkedIn. You can either go to the TruGrid website, or you can go to my personal website. I monitor it. Again, I'm a data guy. I monitor it all the time. I know there are lots of people out there who have 250 or 1,000 unread messages or text messages or emails. That's not me. like it bugs the crap. If there's something unread, that bugs me to death. I'll read it. I promise.
Sure. Great. Well, look, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and for sharing your journey, and best of luck with everything with TruGrid. I'm sure you'll be very successful, and hopefully hit that home run. And I'll be cheering on from the sidelines when you do.
Josh, thank you so much. This has been great.
Jody's story is a powerful and refreshingly honest account of what it truly costs to build a career at the highest levels of the energy and construction industries. What stands out is his perspective, having seen the business from every side of the coin. And it's a reminder that success is not a straight line, but it's a winding path of ventures, culture shocks, unexpected changes, and where the most valuable asset is the wisdom gained from your mistakes. His journey also proves that leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room, but about having the resilience to learn from every failure and the humility to never stop improving. And that's how you truly leave the world or an industry better than you found it. So thank you so much for listening. To learn more about Jody's work, please visit his LinkedIn profile or the TruGrid website, and you can find him on LinkedIn. And if today's conversation resonated with you, then please share this episode with a friend or a colleague to keep the message going. Until then, take care, and thank you for leaving the world better than you found it. Thank you for listening to Better Than We Found It. These conversations are a powerful reminder that while emerging technology is crucial, having leaders with the conviction and resilience to see it through is the only way we will deliver what is required. This podcast is powered by GS2, where our mission is to build the leadership teams that are shaping the future. I'm your host, Josh Huggins, and the conversation doesn't need to end here. Please connect with me on LinkedIn to continue the discussion. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show so you never miss what's next. And until next time, let's all work to leave our world a little better